But let's get on to the big story that is, of course, driving the day. Rishi Sunak facing these calls to sack his Home Secretary. Suella Braverman has been accused of saying that the police have given pro-Palestinian demonstrators special treatment, but also, perhaps more damningly, doing so without the Prime Minister's approval. Labour say that's a breach of the ministerial code. But more than 1,000 police officers have been drafted in to keep these protests under control this weekend. Just how big of an operation will this really be for the police? And can they possibly keep us safe? Can they keep the marching pro-Palestinian protesters separate from those who are wishing to deliver quiet contemplation and reflection on the 11th of this month? Well, joining me in the studio is security specialist Will Geddes. And Will, I know that you have run security operations in the Westminster area before. How difficult is it to ensure that these events go by safely and securely?
Well, the first thing that you do, Tom, is you do your risk assessment. You look at all the component parts as to what will happen on the day or the evening of that particular event. You look at the number of people potentially that you anticipate turning up. You look at what resources you have, which are going to be borrowed or lent by the Metropolitan Police, and then what other security measures there could be in place that you can potentially make sure that the event goes without any kind of interruption. The concern I have, and I ran, for example, the farewell to Brexit party in Westminster Square. And there was 250,000 people that turned up. In January
2020, when the UK left the EU.
Exactly. Yeah. And there were a lot of high-profile people that came along to speak. My politics are inert. I'm apolitical. I don't fall to any one particular side, but obviously I have to consider when I'm planning something like that, all the various elements that may want to come along and disrupt it. Now, what we've got this weekend is an unprecedented situation. Only 1,000 police officers being drafted in doesn't sound like an awful lot. It may sound like a lot to a lot of people, but we have a number of different factors which are going to come into play. You have obviously those that want to commemorate, obviously, Armistice Day, and they want to show their respects, and that will be many people from the veteran community. You have those that are now going to be turning up for pro-Palestine marches, and although that's going to be located elsewhere, we will see cross-contamination on both sides. We're going to see those that are perhaps with a more victorious or vigilant agenda integrating potentially within those at the cenotaph and vice versa.
Do you think there will be people on both sides actively looking for trouble tomorrow?
Yes, there will be. I think that I can say that, and I don't think that comes as a huge surprise to anybody. You have always agitators in large groups. They hide in plain sight. They can use the camouflage of innocent protesters or innocent members of the general public to hide amongst. You have also, and I've certainly been getting a lot of intelligence about far-right groups that want to turn up with some nationalist pride that they believe is their driving force to potentially prevent pro-Palestine agitators from interrupting or disrupting, obviously, the commemorations at the cenotaph. You have members of the military that are a lot of emotions are running very high right now, Tom.
People will have lost friends recently. People will have lost friends many years ago. They'll want to be quietly contemplative, particularly at 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
I suppose that could be a flashpoint.
Oh, yeah, big time. But also it's the irony. The irony which I find quite remarkable is the fact that our commemoration of Armistice Day and Remembrance Weekend is for those that fought before us and fought for our freedoms in this country and the liberties to be able to protest. Now, although we have the right to protest, we don't necessarily have the right to protest where we so choose. And this is really the key factor here. And it's down to the Metropolitan Police to try and corral and ensure that we don't have this cross-contamination. But I think I feel sadly that there will be clashes tomorrow of those that literally are out there simply to cause disruption.
If that's your assessment, why then has the Metropolitan Police said, we don't think that there'll be significant disruption, that's why we're going to allow this march to go ahead? Yes, about an hour after the 11 o'clock poignant moment, I believe, is when the big march is scheduled for. That has been permitted by the Met Police because the Met Police Commissioner has said he doesn't doesn't believe that there is a significant risk to disturbing the peace. Do you disagree with his assessment?
I do. I mean, I've got a lot of great respect for Mark Rowley. I think he's an excellent commissioner. I think he's coming under a lot of fire right now unnecessarily. He only has certain laws that he can utilise and execute in terms of, obviously, the safekeeping of members of the general public. But having said that, they do need to show some levels of robustness tomorrow. They really do. I have a lot of good friends who are in the Metropolitan Police. I have a lot of friends within the military community and the veteran community. And the morale in the police is incredibly low right now, really, really low. And if you imagine you as a police officer, say, for example, Tom, you returning to your family in the evening after policing a pro-Palestine demonstration, which showed a lot of hate towards the police, you would feel very despondent. And therefore, Mark Rowley has to allow his officers to really exercise their discretion, but also their common sense in terms of policing these events to make sure, and this is on both sides, this isn't just on pro-Palestine, this is also on those that are coming up to protect the commemorations of Armistice Day and the Remembrance Weekend.
And there will be some who do so solemnly and properly, but there might be some elements who do so aggressively.
Well, without wishing to sound too crude, you're going to get a lot of squaddies who will have, and many of my friends who will come up, obviously, for the commemorations. They will be in the pub all day, and obviously once alcohol starts fueling, emotions start running higher. You have all these other fragmented far-right extremists.
So the crucial element is for the police to keep these two groups apart, to stop the Palestinian protesters mixing with those who are showing their respect. How would they go about doing it?
Well, the only way that you can do this is really to make sure there's as much distance as possible. Those that break away from either of those groups to come together to clash, you want to try and keep them into a sterile environment to a certain extent. And when I say sterile environment, that is a location where members of the general public won't be affected collaterally by any kind of flashpoint situations. So it will be about keeping them as separate as possible and then respecting those parameters and those boundaries within which they can then undertake whatever it is that they want to undertake.
Gosh, it sounds like a very serious situation could unfold. Obviously, this is all speculation, but do you think that the comments of the Home Secretary in the last 2 days have made things harder?
It's a good question, Tom. It's a really good question. I don't think she'll get kicked out. I don't think Rishi has got, the backbone for that. I think she's going to be left as she is. I think she's only saying what a lot of people are thinking right now. We've also got to speculate that she's maybe party to more intelligence and more information than is necessarily released into the public domain. So I think Suella, yes, I think a lot of us are behind her. She seems to be the one person, perhaps in the Tory party right now, that is actually showing any kind of backbone, some kind of spirit, some kind of resilience to what's going on. And certainly I think we've just got to bear in mind that emotions are running high, hers probably equally. Whether this is her own little crusade that she's on, I don't know. But I think certainly she's probably reiterating or echoing what many, many people are thinking right now.
You mentioned the thoughts of those members of the Metropolitan Police who are going to have to go back to their families after whatever happens tomorrow takes place. And was the Home Secretary right to criticise the police, whether it was as individuals or as an institution, for having what she termed as a sort of two-tier level of policing?
I think it's irresponsible when she should be more than aware that the morale is very, very low, and you don't kick a good man when he's down. And I think Mark Rowley, again, he has only certain parameters within the law that they can execute their duties and they can arrest.
The MP Danny Kruger termed it as a sort of unconscious bias, that police are more likely to perhaps find it easier to go after far-right groups than they are to find it easy to go after perhaps individuals espousing Islamism on the streets of London. Do you think he has a point there?
I don't know. I mean, I think, to be honest, I know some people who've been up to the West End recently who are not far right, who are simply patriotic, who wanted to protect many of the statues that we've seen have been abused in the last week or so. And they've been turned away by the police, and they were low-hanging fruit. They were easy sort of individuals to target, to prevent obviously coming closer to any of the statues or potentially into contact with pro-Palestine supporters. But having said that, it can't be arbitrary. It has to be fair across the board. And I think, again, using the interpretation of jihad as a fairly loose and ambiguous term, I spent a lot of time in the Middle East, in Iraq, Afghanistan, and various other parts of the Middle East. Jihad has a very clear message.
Yeah.
We know exactly what that means, and I don't think there's any ambiguity there.
So very finally,
Yeah.
what would be your advice to members of the public who might want to show their respect for British service personnel, show their respect for those who have fallen to protect our freedoms? What should they do this weekend? Should they go out to those war memorials and pay quiet, solemn respect, or perhaps should they stay at home?
Well, I think, again, it's a difficult one. I don't want to deny anybody in this country of free will that we have here from potentially going up there and showing their respect. We can all adhere to the 2-minute silence wherever we are in the world right now. So even for those who are serving overseas or on operations overseas, they can't obviously turn up in central London, but they can obviously do their respect with their 2-minute silence wherever they are. But having said that, I think members of the general public have to be aware that they are coming into a potential flashpoint situation. So I would say exercise caution, and if you do go, make sure that you are within easy sight and easy reach of any uniformed police officer, because they are there as our protectors to look after ourselves. Be careful where you position yourself.